The last data structure we're going to talk about in this chapter is the tuple. That's spelled T-U-P-L-E. Let's open up the interactive shell so we can look at how tuples work. First thing you should know is that a tuple is very, very similar to a list. We use a different delimiter, parentheses rather than brackets, to signify a tuple, and all the operations of tuples are similar to those of lists except for one detail, and that's the fact that a tuple is an immutable object, which means that every time you change a tuple, you're actually creating another copy, unlike a list where you can change it, as they say, in place. But with a tuple, if I make a change to the tuple, then that just creates another copy. So tuples are a little less efficient than lists because of that immutability. But other than that, they're exactly the same, as you'll see through this example. So the first thing we'll do is create an empty tuple, and we do that by writing a open and close parenthesis alone. That represents an empty tuple. If we want to store some data in a tuple, we put the data inside the parentheses, delimited by commas, just like we do for a list. To access a tuple element, we use indexing just like we do for lists. We can return the length of a tuple with the len function. We can get a slice using slice notation. We can concatenate two tuples together to form a new tuple using the concatenation operator, which actually is just the plus sign. And then finally, let's create a string tuple. We can use the multiplication operator to replicate a tuple. So as you can see, all the operations that we performed on lists earlier in this chapter, we can also perform on tuples. There is one thing we can do with the tuple that we can't do with the list, and that's using it as a key in a dictionary, and we'll look at that later in the course. But for now, we're going to end this lesson on tuples because we've covered all the basics of how tuples are formed, and we'll come back to the subject later in the course. But now we're ready to move on to the exercises for this chapter.